Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Build Your Copywriting Business podcast. Hey there, Kate.
Hello.
Hello. And I believe if we have scheduled this correctly, a very Merry Christmas to all who celebrate, and to the rest of you, Happy Wednesday. Yes.
Happy Wednesday in December.
Happy Wednesday in December. Absolutely. Either way, I hope you're having a lovely day. Today, we are going to talk about storytelling and specifically how to use storytelling to make your copy more impactful. I think there are definitely a lot of scenarios in which it is not appropriate to use storytelling or storytelling in ways that would not be effective. Kate, do you want to tell the story about?
Should we start there?
Yeah, let's start there. Let's start about with the don't do this. Yes.
So I think this is a common mistake or perception or something that where people want to tell a story over the course of several emails. And I think the mistake being that people are looking at their email in the same way that we are when we're writing the emails or we're scheduling them to send or whatever. We're thinking that every user out in the world is going to open every single email of ours and read every single email. And so that there's going to be a logical arc to the story. The problem with this is that not every email is opened by everyone. And even if someone opens email number 1 in a series of, say, let's just say 18 emails in this case, they might open up number 1, number 7, and number 18, or someone else might open number 3, 5, and 18, or whatever combination. And obviously, based on the person, the subject line is going to depend whether they're compelled to open or not. And some people might be more drawn to certain subject lines than others, just based on what they're interested in and what their motivation is.
Yeah. So the in a nutshell, you can't tell a story over the course of 5 emails. It's just not going to work. You need to be careful where and how you use stories. Also, you need to make sure it's an interesting story, that it has a purpose. And we're going to go into this episode about exactly why and how. But there's so many times that podcasts will start out with someone saying, "Oh, hey guys, this is great. Yesterday I went to the grocery store and I had a great time. And I was so frustrated by how the parking lot was so busy." Blah, blah, blah. Those make me wild with frustration.
Or like the cooking blogs that I just want the recipe.
Yes,
exactly. I just want the recipe.
Exactly. Storytelling is not always appropriate.
And I will say, with the email example, can you build a natural path for people in email funnels? Yes, but that's a very different thing than telling the story over the course of several emails. And I think the maybe it's just a nomenclature thing of the words that we're using, but also just thinking about if there is a really important piece of information, you might not want that in just one email. You might want it in several places. And so if the story is very important, everyone needs to hear it, then maybe it needs to be in several places as well and not just one place. So something to think about.
Yeah. Now, here's the thing. The reason that we use stories is that, number one, as a species, human beings like stories. We respond. Interesting stories. We'll get to that in a second. But we respond to stories. We listen to them. We pay attention to them. We also tend to remember them. So as long as, again, a story is interesting and has a purpose, we will engage with those stories. And what we're talking about today is how to use stories to support a specific point. So when you are working with your client and your client might be trying to convey something that is maybe a little bit complicated, or they're maybe trying to emphasize something that emphasize a really important point, a story can be a great way to do that. It can be illustrative. It can be can be emphatic. That's how we're going to use that. We're going to use it that way. It can also make this point so much more memorable. Do we dig into one?
Yes, let's.
Yeah. So which do you want to do first? Well, here, you know what? Here's one. A story that you guys might be familiar with if you have, if you are a CCA student and you've watched our free training video, and if you haven't or you're not, sign up for the video. One of the things that we talk about is why it is such a terrible idea to use sites like Upwork to try to find clients. And There are many reasons, which we won't go into here. But one of the reasons is because the ratio is really, really terrible. Hey there, it's Nicki. I wanted to take a very quick minute to make sure that you knew about our free on-demand copywriting training. Now, whether you are brand new to copywriting or you've been doing it for a while, but you just can't seem to hit those income goals, this training is for you. You are going to learn the 3 secrets to landing freelance copywriting work without relying on frustrating job bidding sites like Upwork or Fiverr, or without cold calling strangers. And if you've watched any of the student success stories on this channel, and if you haven't yet, check them out. This is the exact same training that they all started with. And I mean students like Kate K, who is making 6 figures, working part-time, and retired her husband to help her build her business. Students like Stuart, who replaced his full-time salary, which was a good one, with his freelance income and then some. Stacy, who hit 6 figures in her first 6 months as a freelance copywriter, and Ashley, who landed the in-house copywriting job of her dreams. They all started with this free training, and you can start with this free training too. So sign up right now at freecopywritingtraining.com. It's one potential job and any number of copywriters, 20, 30 copywriters, all vying for that same job. And
20 or 30 if you're lucky.
20 or 30 if you're lucky,
potentially.
exactly. And one of the things that I compare it to is it was a realization I had way back when I was watching The Bachelor with friends, and I'm talking like first or second season of The Bachelor. I was young, The Bachelor was new, but I was sitting and watching it with friends and watching this one guy on screen with these 25 beautiful women. And I remember saying something along the lines of like, wow, okay, great deal if you're the guy, not such a great deal if you're one of these women. And what I mean is that the ratio is off. And that's the same thing you're dealing with if you're on a site like Upwork. There's one job, one guy. And, I think on The Bachelor, it's like 20 or 25 women. But like Kate was saying, it could be hundreds of copywriters.
Mhm.
That's not a great ratio. Chances of you getting that work is not great. So you need to flip that ratio. You need to flip it so there's one you and any number of opportunities. And get into exactly how to do that with pitching, and it's all part of the system. But the key is that using that story I could say like, well, no, it's not a great idea to use Upwork because, you're competing against a whole bunch of different people to get one job. Is that true? Yes.
Mhm.
Is that impactful? Necessarily. And yes, I did kind of say it in a slightly boring way, but even if I tried to make it really, you will remember that point so much better when you think about the story that I told with it.
Think about it so much more, and I think it feels like, oh, she's right. That is a crummy ratio. I feel like it becomes more real when you can put it in terms that people already understand, people are familiar with. If you haven't been on Upwork, maybe you don't quite, you haven't experienced it. But if you have any sense of what The Bachelor is as a show, you're like, oh yeah, I get it. I get it now. That makes so much sense. And so I think this is one of the ways of storytelling. I think this is a great example of telling stories and putting them in things that are in out in the world, pop culture references, doesn't even have to be pop culture, but just things that people are familiar with. And so using an example versus, I know your other example is more of a personal story, which is a different, I think, kind of method of storytelling, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. The one that I come back to again and again, but it's a good thing I'm an open book because this is just dumb. This is just
I told Nicki, I was like, this is a real story. I thought you made this up. And she's like, no, it's real.
This is real. So years ago, I lived in a little condo, and when I moved in, it was a great location, great condo, but it was little, but when I moved in, everything in the bathroom was white, white tub, white toilet, white, and even in the kitchen, white sink, but except for the sink in the bathroom, it was like almond color. I feel like that kind of thing was big in the 80s and almond. So I thought, oh, I don't like this. I don't like this almond color sink. You know what? I'm a smart woman. I can figure this out. I'm going to replace this almond colored sink with a white sink. So I went to Home Depot, took myself to Home Depot, bought the almond color sink, kind of looked at some, pipes because you buy the almond color sink, and then of course I also bought the faucets to go with it, and then you have to connect the faucet stuff to the pipes that come out of your wall, and that is where the problem lies, because I was never actually specific on how that would connect. So I bought some I think it was PVC, and then also like kind of a malleable kind of type pipe thing. And then also there was like plumber's putty, which was like, well, that's great because if things go wrong, I'll just apply plumber's putty. And so my whole thinking around this whole, of course, was like, how hard can it be? Oh, friends. So, I put it all together, and then I turned it on and it leaked. So then I applied some plumber's putty, and I turned it and tried it again, and it leaked some more. And so I applied some more plumber's putty. So by the end of this, I had a sink that didn't work because it leaked, and then it just looked like I had tried to frost it like a cupcake underneath the sink. And I was daunted. I will be honest with you. I was daunted, and I couldn't even deal with it. But to the extent that, and this was, a 1-bedroom condo, whenever people would come over and they would have to use the bathroom, I would have to ask them to wash their hands in the kitchen sink. I would have to ask them, please don't use that sink. Please wash your hands in the kitchen sink. And friends, I left it like this for years. Like probably like 2 years. I left it like this until I finally was like, maybe this is a little bit silly. Maybe I should actually deal with this. And so I called in the plumber that helped with the rest of the building, Paul the plumber. He was great. I miss him. He came in. He fixed it in like 20 minutes. And do you know how much it cost me? This was years. I left it years. $40. It cost me $40 to get him to, and that including parts. I mean, maybe he partially took pity on me because I was clearly a doofus. It cost me $40, and I left it like this for years. And what I learned was that learn from a pro. Get a pro's help. Yes, you could go in and try to figure it out yourself and mess it up and then get frustrated and leave it and not come back to it. Or you could just start at the beginning with a pro. Yes. Either hire a pro to do it for you, or like in the case of copywriting, hire a pro to teach you how to do it instead of trying to figure it all out on your own and messing it up. Years. And $40. Yeah.
Well, I love the problem was not looking at the pipes. I think the problem was not getting training as a plumber, which I fully think you could get training as a plumber and be wildly successful. Mm-hmm. Of course, it would take you a lot longer than $40 in 20 minutes, but
exactly.
Should you want to do that?
Personal
we tell
stories.
the same thing with copywriters. This is why we don't design our own.
Yes. Because we're not.
If you want your portfolio pieces to look like Nicki's sink with plumber's putty all over it, and just a little bit like a third grade diorama art project.
Boy, I should have taken pictures, but I think this is like just back before you even could take pictures with your phone. I don't know. It's probably just too ashamed. But so personal stories can work. Stories out in the cultural arena, as long as it's something that most people will understand. If it's something that is very, very niche, audience, if it's a specific episode of some specific show that, unless you're confident that almost everybody will have seen it, then it's not going to work. It has to be something that most people are familiar with, or something with The Bachelor where even if you haven't seen an episode of it, I can explain to you how it works very quickly, and then you can understand. Now, storytelling is also really, really good for supporting points that might be new or might be a little bit controversial. When our clients are marketing, some of the most effective things that they can say in their marketing is to go against, if it's true, go against what a lot of the advice of their competition is giving, right? So if they can say, look, all the competition is saying X, Y, Z, but you know what? That's not true. And here's why it's not true. You know what is true? This. And here's why this is true. That alone is very, very compelling. But what makes it extra compelling, what cements it in people's minds, is when you can give them an example as well. And an example by way of a story. So an example would be like, for example, you guys might have heard us say, probably have heard us before say that
you raged before.
Right. that you do not need to choose a niche in order to be successful. That in fact, choosing a niche very likely will damage your business and when you're first starting. And well, so you probably have heard that you need to choose a niche. That's a terrible way to do things. You will damage your business. You can't possibly know what niche is best for you. You can't possibly know what work you're gonna want to do. But also, when you choose a niche, you're cutting out all kinds of other work that you could be taking and maybe you'd be happily willing to take, but you put a stake in the ground and you said, no, 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 this is my niche. This is like if you are redoing your house, right? Oh, it's another plumbing story. Surprise, Kate. It's another, I didn't intend it to be, but it's another plumbing story. Let's say you are redoing your house and so you need a plumber and you have 3 bedrooms. You've done well for yourself. You've got 3 bedrooms. So I guess you can have 3 bedrooms. Nice place, 3 bedrooms, maybe it's 4 baths or like 3.5 baths. It's nice. You're so proud of yourself, but maybe you're all them things. Circle back there. There are changes you want to make to these bathrooms. You have 2, 3.5 baths, right? And you want to make changes to all of them. Well, if you call in plumbers and you call in one plumber and you say, this is what I want to do. I need help with all of this. And that plumber says, oh, awesome. But my niche is powder rooms. I only do powder rooms. So I can't help you with all the rest of this. I can only do powder rooms. Now, here's the thing. Are you going to hire the guy who only does powder rooms just to do the powder room portion of your house? Or are you going to hire a plumber who can help you, yes, with the powder room, but also with all of the rest of your house? All the rest of the bathrooms in your fabulous new house. You're going to hire the one who can help you with all of it. And that's the same kind of thing. If you're say, for example, if you're choosing a niche, it's like, I only write sales emails. Okay, super. But sales emails don't exist in a vacuum. Your client is going to need a sales page. They're going to need opt-in page, landing pages. They're going to need all kinds of other stuff. You're not going to get the work if you say, no, 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 I don't do all of that. I only do sales. But in the same thing too with only choosing with one industry.
And this is crucial too, just thinking of the story and the continuity between elements of copy, because and not to go on a niche rage, you guys know how we feel if you choose to do it down the line, of course. But make sure you know what's coming before and after that copy, because I think where storytelling can go so wrong is when you use an example and you tell a story and then someone gets to the next page or place or whatever, and it feels like a completely different experience, or the word choices are completely different, and it's not so much that the story is going off the rails by any means, but there's just not a connection between it all.
And now one thing I want to make sure that is clear is that you can't just tell a story for the sake of telling a story. A story has to support the statement or support what you're trying to get across. It has to bring that person to the same inevitable conclusion. It has to mirror the facts that you were saying in the statement. The story has to mirror it in the exact same way so that it by the end of the story, the listener understands the original statement so much better and so much firmer.
And there's always the danger of, I feel like, clickbaity, having a story just for the sake of like, woo, and then being like, well, what does that have to do with anything? Yeah, you raised eyebrows or you got people agitated, but to what end? And then the other thing to think about, I know Nicki gave some examples of stories, from her personal experience, and obviously using that in FRW and CCA materials makes sense because Nicki's teaching this course and is behind this program. So obviously examples like The Bachelor, you can come up with on your own stories that kind of exist in the world, or just trying like Grimm's fairy tales. We all know a fairy tale. I think those are great places to mine for connections and stories and
common metaphors, things that people understand, things like building a house, things like baking cake,
flying a plane. Even if you don't know what flying a plane is, you kind of have a sense that it's tricky. You need training, you need specialization.
Yeah.
You have instruments, you have things you're following. And thinking about stories too, they don't have to be long. They don't have to be, they can be very quick. For example, knowing your clients, knowing their metrics and knowing, if you've written an email for them and understanding the open rate and click-through rate and how those things relate. The importance of numbers, you might say, okay, without knowing your metrics and understanding what your communications are doing is like flying a plane without instruments or something like that. It can be a very short, quick thing that makes the connection in people's minds. It doesn't have to be. Can it be a longer story? Yes, but I think knowing what the intent is behind your project, as always, with the creative brief, understanding what the goal is. Does it make sense to tell a longer story? Do I need to tell a longer story, or can I convey it in a quick way? Important. But in terms of personal stories, you might have personal stories and maybe they don't quite make sense for your client because they're so specific to you. But that's a great opportunity to go to your client and say, hey, I have the story of when I was dropping my kid off at school and it was, raining out and it was just, like getting stuck in the mud and this, that, and the other thing, all the specifics that make a story feel so rich and compelling. I think that's what's so great about storytelling is that it's in the specificity. So even if someone hasn't had that exact experience, they can relate to it and they can put themselves in that scenario, talking about someone's soccer practice. Maybe it's not soccer practice, but they're like, oh yeah, I have the same thing happen, but it was at football practice or whatever. The more details, the better. But so going to your client and saying, hey, I have the story in mind for this. Has anything similar happened to you? Or do you have a story like this? And use that as a kickoff for the conversation or a starting point for where you could go with this and where to get material for these stories if it doesn't make sense to come from your personal experience.
Exactly. And sometimes too, coming up with these stories, it's a matter of brainstorming a little bit. Sometimes just you, but certainly if your client is open to it, because it may be that, like Kate was saying, that sparks something for your client, or between the two of you, you may think of a more a cultural metaphor, or you may think of a more common metaphor, like like I was saying, baking a cake or something like that. There's a lot in there that you don't. Even if someone's never actually baked a cake, they understand what goes into it, and they can use that to support their points. So, the point is that using stories can be a great way to increase the effectiveness of your copy. It helps people remember things. It helps people understand points. And it also cements your client's expertise, because when they're listening to stories and they're believing stories, that means they're also believing your client. And goes a long way. That's that part of that know, like, and trust factor. And the more that you can help your client with that, the better results your client is going to get. So with that, we will catch you guys in the next episode. Bye, everybody. Like what you heard? Hit subscribe so you never miss a video. And if you're ready to take the first step toward becoming a copywriter yourself, sign up for a free video training right here.